when I was a reporter with KSL Television back in the early 90s, KSL Television came up with kind of a ratings idea, and they decided they were going to do the weather live from small towns around the state of Utah. So back then, television news was really the only way that you had to get news and information. They didn't have the internet back then, and so people watched television news, and everybody in the state watched KSL, and so they knew who I was, and they knew who all the people were at KSL. So the weatherman then was a man named Len Randolph, and Len was a really good guy, and he was very popular and well known. And so they decided that they would have Len do the weather in small towns in central and southern Utah. So that kind of a way to introduce the people of central Utah and southern Utah to the people of northern Utah. So they asked me and the photographer I worked with, Dale Green, to go along with him. And during the day, we would put together a story from that town, and then we would present it on the news, and then he would do the weather. So kind of part of this promotional thing. So it was a lot of fun. It was a fun idea for us. And so we had a portable satellite truck that went along with us to all these towns. So we went to Nephi and we did a story there. And then I think we went to Kanab, and we might have gone to Monticello. And then our last stop was in the town of St. George. And so St. George back then was a pretty small town. It was kind of a sleepy town, but it was nice down there. I've always loved St. George. And it was winter, so the weather was really good in St. George. So we got there in the evening, and we went out and had dinner together, and it was fun. And then we were staying in a bed and breakfast, and it was an older home that had been turned into a bed and breakfast. And so my bedroom was gigantic, and it had big windows that faced the east. And so in the evening, when the sun was going down, I had a great view of the eastern sky and all the red rock, and it was just really beautiful. So I had this great big bed, and so I called my wife before we went to bed, and I told her that we were there because I would check in with her every day. And so she said that she had to get up early the next morning. She was going to go someplace. I think she had to take the baby to the doctor. And so that was fine. So I got in bed in this big bed, and I had one of those dreams that are really strange dreams that it's like it's really real, like you're there, you swear that it really happened, but it was a dream. And so in my dream, I suddenly woke up, but I was in my bed back in Provo, in the house that we live in. And so I was in bed, and my wife was up getting dressed, and I looked out the window, and I saw somebody walking through our backyard. And that was really shocking to me. I had that real fear of, there's somebody in our backyard, and it was just before sunrise. And so I got up and I started walking towards the kitchen, toward the direction that they were going. And as I was walking, it would kind of morph, and suddenly I was in my house when I was 10 years old in California. And I was walking through the kitchen there, and then it would morph back, and I was in my own home in Provo, and then it would go back. And so pretty soon it went back and forth, and I was in my kitchen in Provo, and I was walking towards the back door that's in our kitchen. And suddenly when I went to open the door, it opened, and there was a man standing in the door. And he was wearing what looked like a workman's clothes, like a jumpsuit, and he had on a coat over that. And then he had on a cap, that you wear in the wintertime, and he was holding a shovel. And so it shocked me when he opened the door, and so I just screamed and I pushed his face and I yelled, "Get out of here!" And so when I did that, it made me wake up. And I was back in my room in St. George, and the sun was shining through the window. And so it was just at sunrise there because the sun was coming up in the east. And so I was really, how when you have that dream and you're afraid and you're like perspiring and, you're really scared. And so it took me a few minutes to calm down, And so once I had kind of recovered, I thought, well, that's a weird dream, And so we went on with our day, and I went and we did our story, and we presented it on the news at night, and we did a story at 6, then we went out to dinner, and we did a story at 10, and so it was a busy day. And so I called my wife again. We were staying in St. George again, and I called her, just to check in with her and see how it was going. And so we were talking. She said, "I had a really weird experience this morning." And I said, "What?" And she said, "Well, I had to get up early at about 6 o'clock, and I was in taking a bath, and the baby was asleep, and I was taking a bath in the bathtub." And she said, "I heard men's voices in the kitchen." And she said, "I think somebody tried to get in our house." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" She said, when I went to the kitchen door, she said, I know that I had locked it last night, but it was wide open, and the screen was wide open. And she said, and it just scared me to death. So she said, I was just wrapped in my towel, so I hurried and locked the door, and so she said, I came and got ready. She said, but I think somebody tried to get in our house. And so I just had this, feeling came over me. I was just numb. And so I didn't tell her about this dream that I had because I didn't want to freak her out, and scare her. And so, when I came home, I sat down with her and told her this story about this dream that I had had. And so this is kind of one of those weird things that I'm like afraid to actually tell people about. But I really think that what happened is that I think that somehow during the night, whether it was in a dream or what, I was able to teleport myself back to my home in Provo. And I think that I was actually there to protect my wife from being harmed. And so it was a really weird experience. To this day, I can't really explain what happened, but I think my wife was vulnerable, and I think someone was trying to hurt her. And so several weeks later, I was doing a story on, they had a guy who was a rapist who had been caught, who'd broken into several homes and raped women, tied up the husband, and raped the wife. And I looked at his picture, and that was the guy. That was the same face that I saw, the guy with the hat on. And so I went and I covered his trial. And, I wanted to go ask him if he'd seen someone who looked like me in their underwear who'd pushed him in the face that day, but I never got a chance to. And so to this day, it doesn't make any sense, and the story doesn't make any sense, but to this day, I believe that that's what really happened. I believe that somehow I was able to be there for my wife to save her from having that horrific experience. And it was just one of those dreams that was so real that I can't explain it, and I know that's not doctrinally correct or anything, but I think that's what happened. And I'm glad that I think that my wife and I have such a bond of love that I was able to be there for her to prevent something horrific to happen in her life.